travel, which proved so incredibly destructive and prevented millions of Canadians from traveling to even visit sick relatives and visiting their loved ones. To board a plane or a train, you couldn't even board a train for domestic travel purposes. And so while poring over hundreds of pages of testimony and cross-examination, thanks to the brilliant cross-examination by their attorney, Sam Presvelos, it becomes crystal clear that the mandates were going to happen, and that the bureaucrats had to scramble to find some kind of a scientific rationale for which they weren't able to do even just a few days before the mandate kicked in. So the question is, why did Trudeau do this? Trudeau was, if you remember, the Prime Minister was in a minority in the House of Commons, having lost his majority back in 2019 because of corruption and cronyism scams. And he was desperate to regain it, and vaccine mandates proved to be the perfect wedge issue. And that's what everybody was saying at that time. This is the fall of 2021. Why for travel? Well, one crucial reason is that it's the only sector apart from the federal workplace which comes under the federal government's powers. In other words, this was the only place where Trudeau could flex his muscles and impose a vaccine mandate, and that's what he did.
So your claim here, if I have it right, just so everyone listening knows, is that Trudeau, who was struggling to maintain popularity, to maintain his government, picked a divisive wedge issue because it was a divisive wedge issue, imposed it on Canadians, and then attempt to insist that it was justified by the science.
There was no. It's very clear. The scientific rationale is lacking, at least based on the cross-examination of the key government witnesses in this case.
So he risked splitting the country apart and pitting people against each other personally and socially to facilitate his government's grip on power.
That's what it appears to be at this point, yeah. Okay,
so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify that. So, all right, so you started investigating this. Why?
Well, I was actually aware of the case, but I really had no entree into it until, through a mutual acquaintance, one of the applicants reached out to me, and then I became aware of the case and the background and their fight against the federal government, against the travel mandate. And then, thanks to their litigation, the documents eventually became publicly available. Through the federal court. Ironically, I must point this out, that in response to my piece telling the story of Sean and Carl's legal battle, the federal court, in a very unusual move, and this is what I'm told by many people, that it was an extremely unusual move, they actually made it easier for the public to access the documents by tweeting about it, and they made a link publicly available. And I have to say that some of the cross-examination really reads like a John Grisham novel. You know, you've got the secretive government panel within Transport Canada, which is tasked with crafting the mandate. Apart from its head, who's a career bureaucrat, she has a degree in English literature. We don't really know much about the others. There are about 20 people on this panel, and she names one individual on this panel, but who seems to have some kind of a public health background. When I reached out to her, she said she has a master's in science, but she refused to tell me what that was in. For all you know, it could be astrophysics, but we don't know that. But the key point here is none of these people had a background in medicine, epidemiology, infectious diseases, virology, you name it. They were just there to provide a cover for the mandate.
And you talk about is it Jennifer Little?
It's Jennifer Little, yes.
And she was the one who was in charge of this, is that correct?
Yeah, she was the Director General of this group of COVID
and these are all civil servants you're talking about?
They're all civil servants.
Okay, why did they regard it as part of their duty to provide a cover story for the politicking of the Liberal government? I thought they had a duty to the public, fundamentally. So why were they roped into this, and why did they agree to it?
Well, I mean, this is something that you would have to ask them, but my guess is, they were just doing their jobs, I guess. You have the secretive task force within Transport Canada, and they really had no good scientific rationale, and they were looking for one. They were scrambling for one days before, literally less than 10 days before the mandate goes into effect, and including hoping that the Public Health Agency of Canada, PHAC, would come up with something, which they didn't. And Jennifer Little, the bureaucrat that I referred to with the bachelor's degree in English literature, repeatedly said the decisions were made at very high levels, and these were people senior to her, and invoked cabinet confidence and refused to answer who exactly ordered the mandates.
This was during cross-examination.
Yes, this was during cross-examination.
And she has the right to keep that information secret if it's come from what? From a high enough legislative source?
I would guess so. I mean, this is not my area of expertise. I don't really know the law governing civil servants, but she certainly repeatedly invoked cabinet confidence, and when she was asked questions on who exactly ordered the mandates, making it pretty clear. I guess, I mean, one could infer from this the decision was taken either by the Prime Minister himself or the cabinet as a whole. This confirms what many had suspected all along, that when the Prime Minister introduced the federal mandate, both for travel and for the civil service, and called a snap election 2 days later, August 13, he announces the mandates, essentially preventing millions of Canadians from boarding a plane or a train. And for civil servants who've been working from home since the pandemic began, they needed to be vaccinated. And it was just one of the most bizarre things.
Okay, so let me stop you there and summarize, because this is where the plot gets particularly thick. So not only did the Trudeau cabinet generate an unnecessary travel lockdown, depriving Canadians of one of their most fundamental civil rights, especially in a country of our size, but they did it and scrambled to find a scientific lie to justify it, and it was so far off base from the science that they couldn't even find a suitable lie, and then they magnified their error by calling an election, and all of this was an instrumental attempt to gain more power on the election front, because Trudeau was worried about being in a minority position and looking for a way to increase his grip on the prime ministership.
Right.
Oh boy. It's no wonder no Canadian newspaper would publish that. That's hardly a story at all.
And Jordan, if I may say this, if this really had been about saving lives, why didn't Trudeau just impose the mandates and campaign on